Good afternoon, students. Welcome to Mr. Turner's AP European History class. I hope you're ready to learn today a little bit about one of the greatest historical figures of all time. Love him, hate him. We are talking about Napoleon Bonaparte, a man, a myth, a legend who, in a short time on this earth, ended up making France one of the greatest empires on earth. It all began in the French Revolution when there was turmoil, there was discontent, there was poor leadership. Napoleon took advantage of these things to, in our visual right here, to coronate himself emperor, to grab what amounted to absolute power even over the church. Here you see him taking the crown at his coronation from the Pope and anointing himself first consul, emperor of France. Life is good for Napoleon. But I'm not going to go too much into why Napoleon was a great man. What I want to do is deal today with a little bit about why he fell. What was his fatal flaw? So, a great place to begin would be at the height of his empire in 1812. 1812, we know this year. There's the great I'm blanking a little bit. The song Overture of 1812 Overture. It's this great Russian song that must tell us that there's some battles somewhere. So we look at the map and we see that at France's absolute height, he's taken over Spain. He's put his brother in. He's got French laws in Spain. He is taking over Confederation of the Rhine, which is his word. We might know that today as Germany. They're just about a few decades away from Germany. He has yet to conquer a couple of key places, though. We see in the north, Great Britain remains an enemy, and in the east, the Russians are still remaining an enemy. Let's get real. You can look at a picture and you see there's an invasion of Russia that's going to happen. So let's think about what ended up being his fatal flaw, where Napoleon's empire ended, and I think it begins and ends with this idea by him. Napoleon had an idea where he was going to take over England, great world power at the time, still is, and you can see he had an idea called the Continental System. In this Continental System, he was going to use the French Navy to essentially barricade anybody from importing British goods. So you leave Britain on an island, literally and figuratively. Their economy crashes, makes them easier to eventually force them to capitulate or come to terms. Now, there's an issue over here. Napoleon's had great success. However, I always loved this quote by him. He has one of the greatest empires in world history, but he says, "If I had experienced pleasure, I might have rested. But the peril was always in front of me, and the day's victory was always forgotten in the preoccupation with the necessity of winning a new victory tomorrow." Now, back to this map, Russia becomes a perfect scapegoat because they continue to import British goods. Napoleon knows if he can take over some Russian territory, it will solidify his basically his legacy as the greatest of all time. We're about to see how that goes for him. So in June of 1812, he looks at the Russian leader Tsar Alexander I as the scapegoat for why his empire is not perfect. You're still trading with Britain, you're breaking the continental system. So he takes 600,000 men, La Grande Armée, and he crosses the river into Russia. Okay, well, if you know anything about history, you know troubled times are coming. Tsar Alexander I puts a general in charge of the Russian army on the other side, so now we have our belligerents. We have the French army coming from west to east, and holding them off is Tsar Alexander's General Kutuzov. Now, biggest thing you got to remember about Russia is it is huge. The United States, we have 3 continental time zones, just showing how large ours is, basically how long does the sun take to set. Russia has 8 time zones. But as difficult as this is going to be, Napoleon has a plan. I don't need to take over all the territory. I'm going to get to Moscow, and Moscow will fall. The government will capitulate. I will be in charge, or they will be forced to be with the French Empire. Now, General Kutuzov sees this plan, says, I am not going to play your game. Kutuzov is one of the greatest historical characters because he puts this one thing in charge of his whole strategy, and that is patience. Now, one of the greatest armies of all time invades your country. Patience is not what you want. You want to meet them on the pitched battlefield, and you want to try to stop them from going into places like Smolensk and burning it down. These are not good things. So, Kutuzov says no. We will fail if we take Napoleon on a pitched battle. So, Napoleon invades. You can see his first Western army in the middle, and Kutuzov backs off. Everybody freaks out. He says, patience and time. Patience and time. Lull them to sleep. Bring them into our country. Force them to extend their supply lines, and this will gain us victory. And they go all the way. You can see Smolensk is the first major battle. It falls. It burns. Finally, they meet right outside of Moscow in the east at a place called Borodino, the Battle of Borodino, just to the west of Moscow. In this, there are no clear winners. However, Kutuzov basically says from here on out, the French army, after just pummeling each other for 24 hours, it is a wounded beast. Now, Napoleon does end up making it to Moscow, but those Russians just go for it. They completely clear out the city. Tsar Alexander makes his plea to the Russian people, do what you can, but stay out of Moscow. And what do they do to Moscow? They set fire to the city. Absolute brilliant strategy. Now, historians say, was it a strategy? Was it all a big accident? Was it actually the French burning it down? Well, we do not know. What we do know is Napoleon goes in, the city is burning, his troops are cold, starving because it is November. They're starting to think, is this really for us? Can we make it the winter here? Should we sort of bog down here, do what we can? And Napoleon makes that classic leadership error. What is the worst thing a leader can do at a time of crisis? He hesitates. He hesitates for 2 weeks, and in that 2 weeks, he finally capitulates and says, shoot, we have to get back to France. And now the race is on. Kutuzov's plan works brilliantly because you are in the middle of the Russian winter. We're talking negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The once grand French army that we saw here in June has been reduced to this. Any of you live in cold climates, you know exactly what this feels like. So they bore down, and at every moment when they're looking like this, a small contingent of Russian soldiers come in, attack, and just nipping at the heels as the French try to get back. By the end, Napoleon, you can see he's not looking too happy there. And by the time they make it back to the border, this is what you're looking at of the Grand Army. You've got a pitchfork. I see no muskets in this entire painting. This just tells the whole story. So I end today with an infographic. This is one of the greatest infographics of all time because it gives us 3 major things: the geography of the invasion, the amount of soldiers that Napoleon is working with, and the temperature that is happening. So he invades over here with 600,000. He's moving from west to east towards Moscow over here. And every time the line gets a little bit smaller, he is losing troops. So if you really get into it, you can read this bottom and you can see that he moved in with 600,000. He reached Moscow with 100,000, and he leaves Russia with 10,000 men. I'm a history teacher, not a mathematician, but that is quite a loss that Napoleon suffered. In the end, he can't deal with it, and they send him to a small island off of the coast of Italy where he lives out his days. Or does he? Stay tuned for video 2 on the Battle of Waterloo. Thanks for listening. Smash that subscribe button. See ya!